Hi guys, welcome to Multiverse. Some of you have been asking about a video about the evil Deathstroke, the Terminator, and here we are. So as you can see, we can get pretty close to recreating our friend Deathstroke in this universe online. Pretty much everything we need to create a character is there, although some of it is not quite exactly right, like for example the headpiece. Ironically enough, the headpiece is an official Deathstroke headpiece. It is modeled after the new 52 version of the character, which you can see a bit to the right of the character on the screen. I almost was tempted to make a Deathstroke video not too long ago. Basically, not that long ago, we had 2 episodes in Arrow that were focused on our friend Deathstroke, and that pretty much showed some of the backstory between him and his son. But somehow there was way too many videos to make. I didn't make that video at the time. But later, I will start by showing you how to recreate our friend Deathstroke, and then I will talk about some of the history of the character. So let's take a look at what you need to recreate your friend Deathstroke. So the first piece is the Master Mercenary headpiece. As I mentioned, it is an official Deathstroke piece of gear. It is from the new 52 version of the character. Where can you get that headpiece? Sadly, the only place I know where to get that headpiece is from the broker. Technically, that headpiece comes from the Prometheum lockboxes, but the odds of getting that headpiece in a Prometheum lockbox are like winning the lottery. So the chances of getting that in a lockbox are very, very slim. The odds are much, much better for you to purchase it from the broker. Yes, it will mean farming for cash in order to buy it on the broker, but that's the best way to get it. One could argue even the only way to get it when you think about it. For the gloves, it's the classic gloves. You can get those gloves right at character creation, so that shouldn't be too hard to get. The simple utility belt is the same thing. You can get that at character creation, and it works well enough. There are a few other similar belts with pouches that you could use later on in the game, but again, at character creation, you can get the simple utility belt, and it works more than well enough. For the feet, you can use the clean cuffed. Again, you can get those at character creation, so it shouldn't be difficult to get those boots. And there is the iconic Deathstroke chest piece that you can get in the game. This is an official Deathstroke chest piece. It is modeled after the chest piece that the character used in the comics for years. For the longest time in the character's history, this is the chest piece he was wearing. He did change a few times throughout the years, but this is the classic chest piece that the character wore most of his history. Where can you get that chest piece? You can get it running the Monarch Playing Card Company mission. It is a single player challenge, but there's also another way you can play that mission. The first way you can play it is if you're going to your on duty menu, obviously you go to the tier 3 challenges and you queue for the mission. The other way to play that mission is through the open world. There is a portal in the open world that will bring you to the very same mission, although it's the very same version of the mission that you did while your character was leveling up, but it is the very same mission, and you should be able to get the Deathstroke chest piece from either mission. The biggest distinction is that you can play the mission from the on-duty menu only once a day, unless, of course, you play for replay badges, but I would strongly suggest that you use instead, you could play it once, let's say from your on-duty menu, and then go to Gotham, use the portal in Gotham that brings you to this mission, and then you can repeat that mission over and over and over for as long as you want. So if you really want to farm to get the chest piece, do it from the open portal in the open world, and you should be able to do it as much as you like without spending a single replay badge. And then you have the new Genesis pants. You can get those pants right at character creation. There's no need to wait. So as soon as you create your character, you can get those pants. And last but not least, the back piece is the Themyscirian battlesuit piece. So you can see it's a really nice sword that you can have in the back of your character, and it recreates pretty well the sword that the Deathstroke uses most of the time. The Themyscirian battlesuit is one of the Wonder Woman inspired set of gear. You can purchase the gear once you reach tier 6. Basically, in the Themyscirian command post, there is this character called Karen who's selling that set of gear. So if you purchase the back piece from her, you're going to have a nice looking sword for your Deathstroke. And in the comics, the characters is various shades of blue, but often blue or dark blue is used to recreate black in the comics. So I made a variation where I actually made him a little bit black as opposed to blue. So if you go for black, if you interpret the dark blue part of the costume as black, it works well enough, and it even creates a bit more contrast between the black and the blue, as opposed to having dark blue and light blue. Again, in the comics, often blue or dark blue will replace black because of the printing process, but here you can see what it looks like if you use black instead. And there is a 100% official style for our friend Deathstroke the Terminator. When they added Prometheum lockboxes to the game, some of the styles in those lockboxes were directly inspired by the New 52. And in the case of Deathstroke, we got the Deathstroke version from the New 52 added in the game thanks to the Prometheum lockboxes. The only thing missing from the style is the sword, but I've already told you how to get the sword. So everything that you see right there is the official Deathstroke style from the New 52. Although there's a few differences. Like you can see the straps on the side of the legs. In order to get those straps orange like in the comics, sadly those straps are linked with some small yellow lines, orange lines on the legs. So if you want to have the straps orange like they're supposed to be, you have those weird orange lines as well. And for the boots, I gave it a bit of contrast, but technically in the comic, the style was a little more like this. Sadly, if I put the pants completely blue, we kind of lose the orange for the straps on the side of the legs. But you make your call. You decide whether you want to have the whole pants blue, or if you don't mind having a bit of orange, if you want to have the orange stripe. Here I made the boots orange to give it a bit more contrast, and I think in some of the comics it was colored this way. In other comics it was colored the boots completely black. It depends on who the colorist was at the time, I suppose. And of course, as I mentioned, often in the comics they'll use blue or dark blue to represent black. So I thought let's make a version where the blue is all black instead. And I have to admit that black in this universe online looks really good. Whenever you use black for a style, you can't really go wrong. Again, this is the Master Mercenary style. Technically, you can get it from Prometheum lockboxes, but the odds of getting that style from Prometheum lockboxes are very, very small. At some point, they've added like 800 styles to the Prometheum lockboxes, so the odds of getting the style you want are very slim. So if you really want to have, let's say, the Master Mercenary style, you have to purchase it from the broker. That is the very best option in order to be able to get that style. So buy it from the broker, because if you wait to get it from Prometheum lockboxes, you may wait a long time. And let's take a quick look at which weapons you want to use with your Deathstroke. Basically, Deathstroke uses a combination of staff, sword, and various guns. The best option in order to be able to sort of reproduce your friend Deathstroke would be, ironically enough, to use the staff, and then using Weapon Mastery to switch to sword or to switch to rifle. So using your Weapon Mastery, you could mimic pretty much all the weapons that your friend Deathstroke was using in the comics. You could decide to go with a rifle, which was a weapon of choice for our friend Deathstroke. And the rifle would allow you to, using Weapon Mastery, to switch to using a sword. So you could alternate between rifle and sword using your Weapon Masteries. And you could even use dual pistols if you really wanted to. Deathstroke wasn't really using dual pistols, but he was using a whole bunch of rifle and guns and pistols. So dual pistols is not really out of the question. And you could decide to go with a one-handed sword. Ironically enough, it's probably what would be the less Deathstroke-like thingy. If you just use the sword, that's fine. But if you decide to go with Weapon Masteries, ironically enough, Weapon Mastery Deathstroke uses dual wielding, and he uses hand blasters. I can't recall Deathstroke ever using anything like hand blasters. So if you went with one-handed, you would pretty much be stuck using only one-handed. Or you could use your Weapon Mastery to go into two weapon styles, into dual wielding as needed. Ironically enough, the Weapon Mastery was pretty much modeled after our friend Deathstroke, because Deathstroke uses multiple weapons. So if you really want to go the weapon mastery route, I would probably go with staff, but you could go with the one-handed sword, no problem, if you use, let's say, munitions. If you use the munition powers, you can have your sword, and you can have a whole truckload of guns that your friend Deathstroke uses. So with the one-handed sword, if you go with munitions, you're going to have an awesome Deathstroke. So that's pretty much it for how to recreate Deathstroke in DC Universe Online. So let's take a quick look at the character's history. The character first appeared in the new Teen Titans number 2. Basically, they had just relaunched a new series with the Teen Titans. They had pretty much revamped or relaunched the Teen Titans, you could say. And in issue 2, the character they created to be their nemesis was Deathstroke the Terminator. I fell in love with the character right there and then with his first appearance, and I'm not the only one. A lot of people loved that character, and he quickly became one of the main villains that the Titans would fight from time to time. Although he became a little too popular, that he pretty much became an anti-hero for a while, but that sadly often that happens with villains when they decide to that villains there's some villains are too popular and they decide to either create a series around that villain or something like that. Sadly, the villain pretty much becomes an anti-hero as opposed to being the good old villain that we knew. We saw the same thing happen not too long ago with the Suicide Squad. We had the Suicide Squad movie where we had to have the Suicide Squad people in the film keep on repeating, oh, we're the bad guys, we're the bad guys, because they were not acting like bad guys at all. They were acting like good guys, so they had to tell us in their dialogues that, no, remember, we're supposed to be the bad guys. But they weren't. They were at best, they were anti-heroes. So originally in Teen Titans number 2, the evil Hive were trying to hire our friend Deathstroke to go against the Titans. Deathstroke decided to refuse, but Hive, being a sneaky bunch, decided to use Deathstroke's son, Grant, and they turned Grant into the Ravager, sort of mimicking the powers that Deathstroke had. They artificially tried to give him the powers that Deathstroke had, but Grant wasn't in control of his powers, and the powers were too much for Grant to handle. Basically, his powers burnt him out. They burnt whatever energy he had, and he pretty much became a lifeless husk. But Deathstroke being Deathstroke, that's pretty much what made him distinctive from other evil villains, is that yes, he knew that the Teen Titans were not really responsible for Grant's death. He knew that the Hive were actually responsible. But he had this sort of code of honor where technically he still saw the Titans responsible because the reason why Grant was dead is because he took a contract to go against the Teen Titans, which is what pretty much killed him. So even though he knew that the Titans didn't really kill his son, he still held them responsible because of his weird sense of honor. He also didn't forget that Hive were also responsible. He did get his revenge on Hive eventually. But at the core, the Titans were responsible for his son being dead. So he swore to pretty much fulfill the contract that his son has taken. So his son has taken the contract to deliver the Teen Titans to Hive. Deathstroke decided to fulfill that contract to sort of honor the last wishes of his son. And he ended up doing so during the Teen Titan, the Judas contract. If you never read the Judas contract, I strongly suggest go out and go get that comic and go read it. They did make an animated version of the story. It's not quite the same. They did a good job in the animated version. And from what I understand, they also did that storyline in the Teen Titans cartoon like 10 years ago. But I would strongly suggest go read the original comic because it's not the same at all. When they adapt in a great way a comic to the big screen or to the small screen, there is something that gets lost in translation. There is something missing. Even when they do a great job adapting the comic for the screen, something gets lost. So I would strongly suggest read the original story if you can. I'm sure there's a trade paperback that you could purchase for not that much money. It's worth reading. And in recent years, our friend Deathstroke has been a prominent player I was about to say in the pages of Arrow because that it almost feels like watching a comic every week. Although there's a little too much teen drama, but that's another story. But basically, our friend Deathstroke has been one of the main characters in Arrow for at least some bit. Maybe not main characters, main players. I'm not sure how to properly phrase it. He was mostly important the first few seasons. At first, he was in the flashbacks on the island with Oliver, and then there was this whole storyline when he tried to pretty much take over or destroy Star City just to get his revenge on Oliver on Green Arrow, and even went as far as to spoiler alert, he went as far as to kill Oliver's mother right in front of Oliver and Thea. Thea is Oliver's sister. So Deathstroke, at first he was Oliver's friend, and then once he got infected with, basically they explained him getting powers from a drug called Mirakuru, and but they made it so that Mirakuru drove Deathstroke a little crazy. So Deathstroke went way crazy and decided to try to get his revenge on Oliver by destroying Star City and by killing his mother and by doing a lot of bad stuff. Ultimately, Oliver was able to defeat him and he locked him up on the island. Basically, at some point, Argus created some sort of prison on the island, on Lienu it is called. Basically, it means purgatory. So they created this prison system on Purgatory, and they locked our friend Deathstroke over there. They also locked Captain Boomerang, and not sure if they locked anyone else. So sadly, our friend Deathstroke was locked on the island for quite a few years. And sadly, there's also some behind-the-scene reasons behind that. Basically, they were planning to add Deathstroke to the DCE universe. As you may have seen, he had an appearance in Justice League. They were planning to have him appear in the next Batman film, and also, yeah, he was going to play a role basically in the DC Universe films. They were even planning to make a Deathstroke film. So thanks to all of that, Warner Brothers did what they often do. They decided to tell the people who were doing the Arrow show, you cannot use Deathstroke. So even though the TV shows have done a good job putting Deathstroke on the small screen, getting people familiar with Deathstroke, and getting people to love Deathstroke, sadly, at some point, Warner's decided you cannot use it anymore. We're going to use it for something else. They did the same with Suicide Squad, which is why in Arrow, Deathshot and Amanda Waller were killed in the show, because the Arrow people could no longer use Suicide Squad. Apparently something happened at some point that made them soften their position, that made Warner go, okay, you can use them a little bit. Like in the case of Deathstroke, basically they asked if they could use Deathstroke at least one last time. They wanted to use him for the end of the previous season, for the start of the current season, which is season 6. And also they had a 2-episode parter that they were planning to do with our friend Deathstroke. And that 2-parter was awesome. It was everything I loved about that show for years. It had intrigue, it had drama, and most of all, it had an awesome action scene with our friend Deathstroke. I would show some extract from that scene if I could. Sadly, if I do that, I know my video will get flagged. So if you can, go watch the last, I think it was episode 6 or 7, or if I'm not mistaken. But basically, you can look it up on IMDb if you really need to. There's a couple of episodes in Arrow this year that pretty much were focused on Deathstroke. It was pretty much exploring the relationship between Deathstroke and his son Joe. Ironically enough, the history is a bit mixed up in Arrow. We know that he has a son called Joe, and he also has a son called Grant. But we know Grant. Well, at first we knew that he had a son called Grant, thanks to the TV show Legends of Tomorrow. At some point, the Legends went into the future, and they met Grant Wilson, who was pretending to be Deathstroke at that time. And in the 2-parter episodes we got with Deathstroke, we met Joe Wilson. Joe Wilson in the comics became the superhero known as Jericho. Here they went a totally different way. They pretty much turned Joe Wilson into the evil villain, the Jackal, which was pretty much an enemy of Deathstroke in the comics. And the evil Jackal was the one who had slit Jericho's throat so that Jericho was immune. But in here, the Arrow people gave us a curveball. Basically, they made it so that Joe or Jericho actually is the Jackal. And he never is called the Jericho. And in the two-parter, they call him Kane. Apparently, Kane was Deathstroke's wife, maiden name or something. So so that's the name that Joe was using in that two-parter episode. And there was this awesome scene. Again, a spoiler alert. I would strongly suggest you go watch the episode. If for some reason you don't want to go watch the episode, basically Deathstroke learns that his son was working for the CIA and that somehow he was captured and he was in some, I would say some Russian prison, but that's not quite right. I forget the actual name. And so his son was captured, and Deathstroke needs Oliver to help him negotiate in order to be able to try to get his son back. Apparently, his son was investigating an evil organization called the Jackals, and somehow ended up in prison while he was doing that. So Deathstroke goes to see Oliver. At that point, Oliver decided he wasn't going to be the Green Arrow anymore. John Diggles is replacing Oliver as the Green Arrow, and Oliver Queen is trying not to be the Green Arrow. And when Deathstroke goes to see him for help, he tells him that he doesn't need Green Arrow to help him. He actually needs Oliver Queen because he needs some sort of mediator to negotiate with him, to negotiate for him in order to be able to get his son back. So Oliver goes to the prison, negotiates to try to get Joe back, and then he's being told that Joe is actually dead. So he goes back to see Deathstroke, tells him that Joe is dead. They go back to the prison together because Deathstroke wants to see his son's body one last time. And somehow he's told that that's not going to be possible. And then it turns out that Joe is not really dead. He was actually broke out of prison by the evil Jackals. But then things change. It goes from a diplomatic mission to a rescue mission. And of course, at first, Oliver is only supposed to be there to negotiate. But then, of course, he tells Deathstroke, listen, this is different now. I'm going with you. And Deathstroke tells him, nah, kid, you're staying here. I promised you wouldn't have to be Green Arrow. And but then Oliver tries to tell him, yeah, but things changed. But Deathstroke, being the sneaky Deathstroke that he is, he kind of drugged Oliver a bit. So Oliver pretty much falls unconscious. But then Oliver tries to struggle and tell him, you cannot do this alone. And Deathstroke tells him, alone is what I do best. And then he goes to the evil villain lair and he wipes the floor of those villains. It was glorious. It was one of the best action sequence we had in Arrow in a long time. And holy crap, it was. I often mention that there is a lot of drama in those TV shows, and yet that sometimes you have to suffer through the drama to get to the good stuff. Well, this was the good stuff, and this was some really good stuff. Seeing Deathstroke being Deathstroke and going against all those evil jackals. That was priceless. But then there was another plot twist. Basically, we went from plot twist to plot twist to plot twist within just that one episode. And that the plot twist at the end is that Deathstroke cannot save his son from the jackals because his son is the leader of the jackals. His son is the jackal. And of course, Oliver being Oliver, he followed Deathstroke to the evil villain lair. And then the next episode, they try to have a few twists again. They try to have Deathstroke join the Jackal. Then the Jackal kidnap capture Oliver Queen. And then Joe asks Deathstroke to kill Oliver Queen. And at first you think, oh crap, he's going to do it. But of course, he doesn't do it. So they pretty much escape together. And then they come back and stop the evil Jackals who are trying to do some nasty deeds. And towards the end of the episode, you have the confrontation between Joe and his father, but of course Joe manages to escape, and of course Deathstroke is going to go after him, and we pretty much end the episode with Deathstroke thanking the kid for helping him out, and then you see Deathstroke going away, and you see like a whole bunch of mist, and you see Deathstroke pretty much disappearing in the mist. It was awesome. I would suspect that this is probably the last time we're going to see Deathstroke within the Arrow series, but who knows? Maybe they'll surprise us later down the line. Maybe Warner will allow them to use Deathstroke once more. But these two episodes with Deathstroke were a great finale for Deathstroke, and they were also one of the reasons why watching Arrow is so awesome. Yes, sometimes you have to go through some teen drama that doesn't really make sense, but Usually, when they actually crank up the superhero action or even just the action, they really do a good job. So if you're looking for action, adventure, intrigue, the Arrow TV show is still a good place to get that. And the Deathstroke has been one of the key players at various times during the Arrow series. And this year was no different. Even though he only had a couple of episodes, every time he was there, he did a great job. And the two episodes, the two last episodes with Deathstroke, those were awesome. I came very close to making a video just about that, but there was the Crisis on Earth X crossover just around the corner, so I wasn't sure if I was going to do a Deathstroke episode of Arrow, and then doing the Crisis on Earth X. So there was a little too much going on at the same time. So I finally decided to not do the Deathstroke video. But some of you guys have been asking for a Deathstroke video. So I thought this was a good opportunity to mention the two-parter in the Arrows that were probably a little goodbye to Deathstroke. And that will probably be the last time we see Deathstroke within the Arrow TV series. So if you're a big fan of Deathstroke, I would strongly suggest go read the new Teen Titans comics, at the very least up to the Judas contract. Once the Judas contract ends, you could decide to keep on reading or not. You decide. And also there was a series about Deathstroke himself in the early 90s. It was called basically Deathstroke, the Terminator. If you're a big fan of the character, that series was pretty good. And of course, if you're really a big fan of the character, I would strongly suggest watch Arrow. Deathstroke has been playing an important role in most Arrow seasons. Sadly, at some point, as I said, he wasn't allowed to be able to be featured in Arrow anymore. But last year, at the very last episode, we finally saw Deathstroke again. And this year, we saw him in the first episode and the two-parter that I mentioned. The two-parter was episode 5 and episode 6 of season 6. So episode 5 was called Deathstroke's Return. Episode 6 was called Promises Kept. So I would strongly suggest watch at least those two episodes, but even better, watch Arrow. It's an awesome series, and for the first couple of seasons, Deathstroke was an important player in that series. And again, I would suggest that you read the Teen Titans comics where Deathstroke appeared, and most importantly, if you can at the very least read the Judas contract, there should be a trade paperback just with that storyline. That storyline alone is awesome. But even better, if you can read from the New Teen Titans number 1 all the way to the New Teen Titans number 50, and around issue 40 something, you have the Judas contract in there. If you can read that whole run, it's an awesome run. And if you're a Deathstroke fan or even a Teen Titans fan, it would be a great idea if you can actually read that run. So that's going to be it for now, guys. So as always, thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.